If you know me, you may know that I'm not the biggest high fantasy book lover, but there's this one book series that literally everyone's been telling me to read for the longest time. So today I'm giving into peer pressure and I'm reading this series, and that is The Lord of the Rings. And to ensure that I'm actually going to finish this series in a timely manner, each day that I read, I'm going to be using a random number wheel to decide how many hours I read per day, which can go up to a full 8 hours of reading in one day, which I really hope I don't actually get, but it's on there. So let's start reading. All right, this is day 1 of reading Lord of the Rings. So I need to first figure out how many hours I'm going to be reading today. The minimum amount of hours is 1 and the maximum is 8. I've seen people do this before and they go up to like 12 hours, but honestly I don't understand how people can read for 12 hours in a day. So I'm being a little bit more realistic. So let's see what I get for today. 2. Yay, it's only 2. I know I'm gonna get 8 at some point, I just know it, but I'm so relieved that today it's just 2. So. So I just finished reading for 1 hour. I still have 1 more hour to go. I'm going to do that a little bit later. I wanted to say that I do think it's so important to get all the background context of what happens before this first book takes place, like before reading this book, if that makes sense. Which is why before starting this, I actually listened to the abridged version of The Hobbit.
Yet Bilbo found his eyes growing heavy.
I heard that reading The Hobbit first really helps your experience of reading The Lord of the Rings, and I couldn't agree more because there's so much in this book, even just in the first couple of chapters, that I don't think I would have really understood well if I hadn't already listened to The Hobbit. So anyway, I feel like I'm understanding this one starting off really well. And now I'm also getting introduced to Frodo, who's I know going to be the main character throughout all 3 of these books. So it's going well so far, and I'm going to get to reading for my second hour in a little bit. It's the next day. I need to figure out how many hours I'm reading today. I got a new wheel, so now I have more options. It's 1 all the way to 8. So let's see what I get today. I can't even see what that is. 6. Okay, that's better than 8, but that's a lot of hours. I definitely need to go ahead and get started on reading if I'm gonna do 6 whole hours today, so let's go. I ended up deciding to start off this day getting everything done that I needed to do besides reading, so that way the whole rest of the day could just be dedicated to reading this book. That meant I had a little bit of a later start than I wanted, so I kind of had to read quickly. I only just read for about 2 hours and it felt like the longest time, but that's not to say that I dislike reading this book because I am actually enjoying it a lot thus far. I can tell I'm reading it a little bit slower than a normal book, and that might just be because I'm trying to like understand the world as best I can. It's also really small font, and that might have something to do with it. But so far I'm really loving the like adventure part of it. I like that they're on this long journey, and I love some of the places they're going and all the woods they're traveling through and stuff. It's just a fun vibe. Like I said, I've done 2 hours and it's almost 1 o'clock. So I think I'm gonna eat lunch and then do like a 2-hour sprint and then take a break and then do another 2 hours. And hopefully I can hit the 6 hours by the end of the day. I think the best way to get really into a book that you're afraid you're not going to be super interested in is force yourself to read it constantly. Because I'm just reading constantly, I'm like so into this world, like my brain is in the world of the Lord of the Rings. Now, even when I'm like taking breaks away from reading as I'm doing these like 6 hours, the times where I'm taking a break from reading, I'm like thinking about the book and I'm wanting to go back into it, which is crazy. I did not think I was going to be this way with this book. Finishing this day off was actually a lot harder than I thought. I ended up having to stay up pretty late to read, but I did eventually finish. And the fact that I did struggle to get 6 hours done made me really scared for if I ever got 8. But I was just trying to not think about that at this time. So I'm gonna be honest, a big reason why I wanted to start this book is because I heard that Tolkien was a big Christian writer. And obviously I've known about these books for a long time, but I never knew that there were possibly Christian themes played out through the story. And I don't think anything is super obvious, and I didn't want to go into it like trying to force Christian themes to come out of something that it wasn't like intended to be. But the more I read this book, the more I actually am seeing it being played out, and maybe it's just my own interpretation, but the ring to me seems like such a big metaphor. The fact that it's supposed to be like a weight that Frodo has to carry around throughout this long journey, the fact that it's always tempting him and he's having a hard time resisting putting it on, to me that just seems very much like it's supposed to represent sin and walking through life with the weight of it. I love when certain aspects of a book have deeper meanings, and I love trying to figure out what those are. And so to me, this just makes the book so much better. Good morning. It's day 3, time to spin the wheel again. I'm kind of terrified. What does that say? 1, yay! I definitely could do more than 1 hour, and I think I might end up doing more than that, but I'm happy that I only have to do 1 because I do have a bit of a busier day today and I don't have 8 hours to read, so I'm very happy that I just got 1. So relieved. I read so much over these next couple of days, but the good thing was that I was getting really far into this book at this point. And then the next day I got a 5 hours, which was also a ton of reading, but because of it, I was finally able to finish the book. So yesterday I got 5 hours to read, and I honestly don't even know if I ended up getting up to 5 hours because I finished the book. And I have to say I really did like the ending of this one. Before going into this, I think I talked a little bit about how I'm not the biggest high fantasy reader. I find that super intense fantasy books are just kind of like a chore to read for me sometimes. They feel like they have a lot of backstory or a lot about the world that you have to learn. And although I'm not gonna say that this was like exempt from that, but I will say that it ended up being worth it in the end, because now that I do have all the knowledge about the world and the backstory and the things that I need to know, that made the story so much better once you get to the good parts. So one thing that I love the most about the Hobbit audiobook that I listened to, the whole like theme of how Bilbo was in this very sheltered, perfect, like easy life living in the Shire, and then this adventure came to him kind of out of nowhere and he had to make a big decision on whether he wanted to leave his comfort zone and go out and do something scary or just stay and not have to deal with the scariness. And he ends up leaving and, you know, going on his whole adventure. And then the same thing kind of happens again in this book with Frodo and all the other hobbits. They definitely have been shocked several times because of, you know, just all the scariness that is in the world outside of the Shire. There's a part where one of the hobbits is talking to someone and he says, "And if I had known what the world outside was like, I don't think I should have had the heart to leave it." And then someone responds, "The world is indeed full of peril, and in it are many dark places. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater." Anyway, I just like those parts of this book. I did enjoy this book, even though parts of it were hard, but now it's time to start the second one, which I'm really, really excited about. And earlier this week, I did go ahead and decide that I was most definitely finishing this series. So I took a trip out to the bookstore and bought the second and third book, so I had them ready to go as soon as I could start reading them. Okay, 3 is easy enough. I might even do more than that. So let's go. I don't know why, I kind of expected the second and third book to not be quite as good as the first one. Just because, I don't know, I had heard so much about the first one before, but not as much about the second and third. However, I'm really liking the story in this one thus far. Things are changing a lot. There's actually multiple different stories happening and we're going into different people's perspectives. And another long journey is taking place, but there's actually a lot of suspense going on. I just can see myself getting a little bit more invested in this one, so maybe I'll even like it better than the first one. At this point, I felt like I was getting into a really good routine of reading. I was invested in the book and everything was just going really well until this happened. To be honest, I was really hoping I would go this entire time without having to do an 8. I know that's like not that much for a lot of people, but that's a ton of reading for me. I don't see how people sit and read or even have time to read for more than like 3 to 4 hours in a day. It's also already after 10 a.m. so I'm not starting super early. I should get on this right away. There's a lot to do, so I'm gonna start now. Okay, I've done about 2 hours of reading thus far today. I've noticed that there's certain sections in these books that I move so slowly through, and then there's certain sections that I read really quickly through. They've had a couple of these like council meetings where basically it'll be like a big group of people and they're all discussing and decisions are being made, and it just seems to go on forever. And I just finished a really long chapter that was just full of that, and it took me a long time to get through it, but I'm starting to get out of it now, so hopefully things will pick up. The thing that I was the most curious about and into at the end of the last book was Frodo and Sam's part of the story. They ended on a little bit of like a cliffhanger, and I've just been so curious as to what's going on with them. And I am over a third of the way through the book and we still haven't gotten anything about their story yet. It's just been in the perspectives of different people doing different things, and I'm just really waiting for it to happen. Hopefully it'll happen soon. I'm taking a little bit of a break right now because I just feel like I need one, and then I'm gonna go back to reading. Hopefully I can do 2 more hours. When I schedule it out like that in my head, it seems so easy and doable, but I know that it's not going to be that easy. So I've also noticed that changing up my reading location helps me to like get into reading a little bit better. Like if I've read for an hour and I'm really tired of it, I just move places and I feel refreshed again and I can keep going. Okay, so I'm officially 4 hours into reading now. I'm halfway through. It's almost 3 o'clock now, so it's getting a little bit later, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm at the point right now where I really need to take a long break. I feel like I've just been reading for way too long. I'm starting to get a little bit of a headache. So I think I'm gonna go to the gym, even though that might not be the smartest decision to spend that much time away from reading today. I just need a long break. So I'm gonna go to the gym and then hopefully read maybe a couple more hours before dinner and then 2 more afterwards. And then I will have hit 8 hours. I'm crossing my fingers and I'm hoping that it's as simple as I made that sound. I just have a feeling that it's gonna end up being a little bit harder than I thought. Hopefully this break will make me come back like refreshed and ready to read a lot more. So I went to the gym and then eventually came back and I was able to do some more reading as the sun was going down outside. Then I did about another hour inside. My last 2 hours of this challenge were definitely the hardest. I think I was just really tired of reading at this point and it was pretty late. But I was trucking through regardless and eventually I did finish. And what was crazy is that I think I even went a little bit over 8 hours because when my timer went off, I was only a couple chapters off from finishing the book, so I just kept going. Alright, I finished The Two Towers last night and it was such a sad ending. It did eventually go into Sam and Frodo's story towards the end of this book and I was so happy that it did. One of my favorite things I saw a lot throughout this book was the emphasis on how much has changed from Frodo and Sam and the other hobbits living in the Shire, living a very peaceful, normal life, and then now how much has changed in their lives and how much they've gone through and stuff. How like they're discovering how much bigger and crazier the world is in both bad ways and good ways, but it seems like even though they're all really scared, they kind of like it at the same time. I guess I just noticed the most like character progression in this book and how much has changed. So anyway, I'm super excited to start the next book. I'm gonna go spin the wheel and I'm gonna start reading. Okay, so I'm ready to get into the 3rd book and I sat down to come and spin the wheel again, but then I decided I think I want to do something a little bit differently with this 3rd book. Instead, I want to read this book at my own pace. Crazy, right? And it's not just because I want to get out of reading an insane amount of hours every day, although I definitely do. The main reason I was doing the wheel for the first 2 books was just to make sure I stay on track with reading, because I was like worried that there was a chance I wasn't gonna really like them because I'm, again, not the biggest fantasy lover. So I thought there was a good chance that I would just not read much and I wouldn't get through them quickly. So I just wanted something to make sure I was like reading a decent amount every day. But now that I've reached the 3rd book, I feel so much differently about this whole series in general. I'm way more interested in it than I thought I would be, and I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. So I'm actually really curious to see how quickly I will read this book just reading at my own pace. I talked a little bit before about some of the Christian themes I was seeing in the 1st book, and although I've been continuing to see them throughout each of the books I've been reading, but I feel like with this one, it's getting stronger and stronger, mostly with like the evil that they're fighting and the fact that each of these main characters, they know that they're tasked to be the ones to stop this darkness. And it's getting to the point now where everyone is basically sacrificing their lives in order to stop this, but they're not even questioning it because they know it's just what they're supposed to do, which to me ties back to a lot of biblical themes. So I don't know if that's how this is supposed to be or not, but that was my interpretation, and to me it just makes it a lot better. My only real goal here was just to try and read some every day, but I didn't force a specific amount of hours, and honestly I wasn't even keeping up with how long I was reading each day. All I know is that the story was getting really intense and I was reading at pretty much any chance I got. And what really shocked me is how long this book ended up taking me to read compared to the others. So I finished The Return of the King. The ending was kind of wild, but I also really loved it. Because I've been reading these constantly over the past few weeks, I feel like I've just been so invested in this world. I feel like I've been living in it, and I'm kind of sad that I'm not going to be anymore. The whole series was just great, honestly, from the like epic adventures to the fighting against the evil, the idea of like all these little hobbits saving the world, and then all the Christian themes I saw throughout the series. Even though I said a couple times that there were a few moments throughout the series that were a little bit slow, it was all definitely worth it. And I finished this book just as quickly as I did the other two. It took me about 5 days, which I think just goes to show how into this book I eventually got. So the whole trilogy is finished now, and honestly I feel like I'm starting to become a fantasy lover after all, because I'm super excited to start more books like these in the future.